The knocking started at midnight, 3 sharp raps that made my wine glass shiver on the coffee table. I muted the true crime documentary I'd been half watching and waited, hoping whoever it was would give up and leave. They didn't. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Through the peephole, I saw him, my father, Mark, looking decidedly less polished than the last time I'd seen him 2 years ago. His usually pristine suit was wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled. I'm Kylie, and I hadn't spoken to my father since the day I walked out of his house, leaving behind his manipulative games and his wife Vivian's quiet cruelty. Yet here he was, standing in the hallway of my apartment building at midnight on a Tuesday. "Come on, sweetheart, open up. I know you're in there." His voice carried that familiar, honey-smooth tone that always preceded asking for something. I kept my hand on the chain lock. "It's midnight, Dad. What do you want? Can't a father visit his daughter?" He attempted a warm chuckle that fell flat. "I've had, some difficulties. I need a place to stay for a few days." The wine in my stomach turned sour. "Where's Vivian?" "That's complicated." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from childhood, his tell when he was about to spin a story. "Things haven't been good at home. I lost my job last week, and Vivian, she's not handling it well." I could picture Vivian's reaction perfectly. Her practiced, concerned expression, masking calculation, already plotting how to turn this situation to her advantage. "What happened to all those commission checks, the investment properties?" "Gone." He pressed his forehead against the door. "I made some mistakes, Kylie. Bad investments. I know I don't deserve your help, but I have nowhere else to go." The old me would have opened the door immediately, desperate for any scrap of paternal attention. But I'd spent 2 years in therapy unlearning that instinct. "What about Liam?" I asked, referring to my younger brother. "Can't you stay with him?" "He's still in college, living in the dorms. Please, Kylie, just for a few days while I sort things out." I studied him through the peephole again. The desperate edge in his voice seemed genuine, but then again, it always did. I remembered the last time I'd believed him, when he'd promised to protect me from Vivian's subtle sabotage. Instead, he'd stood by while she systematically undermined every achievement, every relationship I tried to build. "Dad, I can't—" "I'll tell you everything," he interrupted, "about your mother, about what really happened after she died, things you need to know." My hand froze on the chain lock. He'd never voluntarily brought up Mom before. Any mention of her had been met with swift subject changes or convenient phone calls he had to take. "You're trying to manipulate me," I said, but my voice wavered. "No manipulation, just truth. Finally." He pulled something from his pocket, a worn envelope with my mother's handwriting on it. "I should have given you this years ago." My throat tightened. I recognized that envelope. I'd seen Mom writing letters in the weeks before her death, but they'd disappeared afterward. When I'd asked about them, Dad claimed he'd never seen them. "Why now?" I managed to ask. "Because I'm tired of pretending, of lying. Maybe losing everything is what I needed to finally do right by you." My hand moved to the chain lock again, but this time I slid it open. Not because I believed him, I knew better now, but because that envelope held answers I'd spent 15 years searching for, and I was done letting him control access to my own history. As I opened the door, the look of relief on his face almost seemed genuine. Almost. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said, stepping inside. "You won't regret this." But watching him survey my apartment with those calculating eyes, I already did. Whatever game he was playing, whatever crisis had driven him to my door, I had just invited it in. The question was, could I beat him at it this time? The envelope sat unopened on my kitchen counter all night, a cream-colored accusation. Dad had passed out on my couch, his soft snores a rhythm I remembered from childhood road trips. Back when Mom was still alive and everything made sense. I touched the edge of the envelope, tracing Mom's handwriting. The paper felt delicate, like it might crumble under my fingers. Just like every good memory I had of her, seemed to crumble under the weight of what came after. My phone buzzed, a text from Liam. Dad's with you? Vivian's going nuclear. Before I could respond, another message popped up. She's saying he stole money from their joint account. A lot of money. The coffee I was drinking turned bitter in my mouth. Of course there was more to the story. There always was with Dad. You should have come to me first. The voice made me jump. Dad stood in the kitchen doorway, his suit even more rumpled after sleeping in it. I would have explained about Vivian. Explain now. I slid Liam's text across the counter. What money? He picked up my coffee mug and took a long sip, a habit that used to drive Mum crazy. It was my money too. I earned it. Vivian she changed after we got married, started controlling everything. The accounts, the house, even how I dressed. He gestured at his wrinkled suit. This is the first time I've worn what I wanted in years. That doesn't answer my question. 200,000, our retirement fund. He set the mug down carefully. I had to take it. She was going to. My phone rang. Vivian's name flashed on the screen. Don't, Dad said quickly. She'll try to manipulate you. She always does. Rich coming from him. I answered anyway, putting it on speaker. Hello? Kylie, thank goodness. Vivian's voice dripped with careful concern. Is your father with you? I'm worried sick. He's not well, sweetheart. He's been having episodes, making wild accusations. The doctors think... What doctors? Dad interrupted loudly. More lies, Vivian. Is that all you know how to do? Mark? Her tone shifted instantly from concern to sharp. You need to come home. We can work this out privately, as a family. There's no need to involve the children. I'm 24, I said, not a child. Of course not, dear. But you don't understand the situation. Your father, he's been unstable since losing his job, making paranoid claims about me trying to control him. He needs help, not enablement. I watched Dad's face as she spoke. For the first time, I saw something crack in his practiced charm, real fear flickering behind his eyes. The letter, I said suddenly. Show me what's in it. Dad's hand tightened around my coffee mug. Not with her listening. What letter? Vivian's voice sharpened further. Mark, what have you done? He reached for the envelope on the counter, but I snatched it first. The paper was thin enough to see there were several pages inside. Kylie, Vivian said, whatever he's shown you, it's part of his delusion. You remember how he got after your mother died? The drinking, the paranoia. I never drank, Dad shouted. That was your story. You told everyone I was drunk the night Sarah died, but I wasn't. I would never... He stopped abruptly, colour draining from his face. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. What about the night Mum died? I asked quietly. Nothing, Dad said quickly. Too quickly. Vivian's trying to confuse things like always. But Vivian was laughing now, a cold sound that raised the hair on my arms. Oh, Mark, still protecting your secrets? Tell her. Tell her where you really were that night. Or should I? Dad lunged for my phone, but I pulled it away. What is she talking about? Don't, he pleaded. Not like this. Read the letter first, please. Your mother explains everything. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, then at my father's desperate face, and finally at Vivian's name glowing on my phone screen. Someone was lying. Maybe everyone was. I'm hanging up now, I told Vivian, and Dad's staying here until I read this letter and figure out what's true. You're making a mistake, Vivian said softly. But then, you always do choose him, don't you? Just like your mother did. Right up until the end. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me alone with my father and an envelope full of 15-year-old secrets that suddenly felt like a live bomb in my hands. I found the bank statements in Dad's briefcase while he was in the shower. Not snooping, just looking for answers he wouldn't give me about Mum's letter, which he'd somehow managed to make disappear again. Instead, I found something worse. Transfer records showing systematic withdrawals from accounts I'd never known existed, dating back to the month after Mum died. My hands shook as I took pictures with my phone. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands moved through shell companies with names like Sunset Ventures, and Coastal Holdings. Dad's signature was on everything, but Vivian's elegant scrawl appeared too, authorizing transfers that had slowly drained what must have been Mom's life insurance money. The bathroom door opened. I shoved the papers back, but not before noting one final detail: a recurring transfer to an account holder named Sarah Mitchell. My mother's maiden name. Still here? Dad appeared in fresh clothes, his hair damp. I thought you'd be at work by now. Called in sick. I watched his face carefully. Had some research to do. His expression flickered, just for a moment, but I caught it. About Sarah Mitchell. The color drained from his face. Where did you hear that name? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meet me at Riverside Park, 1 p.m. Come alone if you want the truth about your mother. E. No one, I lied to Dad. Just something I remembered. He studied me with the same calculating look he used to give difficult clients. Kylie, there are things about your mother. Complications you don't understand, like the fact she was still alive 6 months after you told us she died. The words hung between us like a live wire. I hadn't meant to reveal I'd seen the transfer dates, but his reaction confirmed everything. He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. How long have you known? About 30 seconds, based on your face. My voice sounded strange, distant. Why, Dad? Why would you? A key turned in my front door. The spare I'd given Liam for emergencies. My brother burst in, face flushed. Vivian's gone. She cleared out all the accounts this morning. Everything. Dad jumped up. That's impossible. She doesn't have access to... The Sarah Mitchell account, I interrupted. Or just the regular ones. Liam's head snapped between us. Who's Sarah Mitchell? Our mother, I said, just as Dad shouted, no one. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Time's running out. The truth dies with Eleanor if you don't come now. Eleanor. Our grandmother. Dad's mother, who disappeared from our lives the same time Mom died. I have to go, I said, grabbing my keys. Dad grabbed my arm. Whatever you think you know, I yanked away. Don't touch me. 15 years, Dad. 15 years of lies about Mom, about money, about everything. And now Vivian's gone with all of it. Not all, Liam said quietly. She left this. He held out an envelope, identical to Mom's letter, but newer. Inside was a single photo. Mom, very much alive, sitting in a hospital room. The timestamp showed a date 6 months after her supposed death. Behind her stood Eleanor, and in Mom's arms was a baby. That's not possible, I whispered. That baby would have been born after I told you your mother died in a car crash, Dad finished, his voice hollow. After I married Vivian, after everything changed. My phone buzzed one final time. Eleanor doesn't have much time left, neither does Sarah. Choose wisely. I looked at the photo again, at the baby whose age made no mathematical sense unless everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. I'm going to Riverside Park, I announced, alone. Kylie, please! Dad reached for me again. You don't understand what you're walking into. But I was already moving, the photo burning in my pocket like a verdict. Behind me, I heard Liam ask, Dad, why does that baby look exactly like Kylie did at that age? I closed the door on Dad's response, but not before I saw the guilt in his eyes. Guilt that suggested the answer to Liam's question would shatter whatever remained of our family's carefully constructed lies. The truth was waiting at Riverside Park, and this time, no one would stop me from finding it. Eleanor wasn't at Riverside Park. Instead, I found Sophie waiting on our usual bench, clutching a manila envelope and looking like she hadn't slept in days. Before you say anything, she started, rising to meet me, I've been helping your grandmother for months. She made me promise not to tell you until it was time. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Sophie, my best friend, my confidant through every crisis since college, had been keeping secrets about my own family. Where is she? My voice came out harder than I'd intended. Hospital, St. Mary's. Sophie held out the envelope. She wanted you to see these first, said you needed to understand before you came. Inside were more photos. Mom in different locations, a cabin, a beach, a garden I didn't recognize. All dated after her supposed death. In each one, she looked progressively more ill, but alive. Definitely alive. There's more, Sophie said quietly. The last photo made my knees buckle. Mum in a hospital bed, holding not one baby but two. Twins. The date stamp matched the photo Vivian had left. That's impossible, I whispered, but the evidence was right there in my shaking hands. I don't have a twin. According to Eleanor, you did. Sophie touched my arm. Your father and Vivian separated you. Each took one baby. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the bench for support, memories realigning themselves like pieces of a broken mirror. The strange comments Vivian had made over the years about her real daughter. The way Dad sometimes looked at me with guilt so deep it seemed to age him. My phone buzzed. Liam, Dad's gone, left a note saying he's fixing things. What's happening? Another text followed immediately. Vivian just posted something weird on social media about reuniting the family. She tagged someone named Claire Mitchell. Claire Mitchell. The name hit me like a thunderbolt. I pulled up social media and found her profile. The resemblance was uncanny, like looking in a mirror, but with different clothes, different hair, different life. My twin. Eleanor tried to stop them, Sophie continued. That's why they cut her out of your lives. She threatened to expose everything, so they threatened to take both of you away completely if she didn't stay quiet. But why? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Why separate us? Money? Sophie's voice hardened. Your mother's family fortune. It could only be inherited by her children after they turned 25. If there was only one heir, that person's legal guardian would control the money until then. 25. We were 24 now, less than 6 months away from... My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, sister. The voice was mine, but not mine. Familiar yet strange. I suppose you've figured it out by now. Mother's money, father's lies, Vivian's little game of raising me as her own. Claire. The name felt foreign on my tongue. We should meet. Compare notes about our separate lives. Share stories about how they manipulated us. Her laugh was bitter, sharp. Vivian's been quite enlightening since she showed up at my door this morning. Where's Dad going? I demanded. What's he trying to fix? Haven't you guessed? He's racing to Mother's bedside. Yes, she's still alive. Barely. Terminal cancer. Eleanor's been caring for her all these years in secret. Rather poetic that both our mothers are dying at the same time, isn't it? The ground seemed to sway beneath my feet. Both? Oh, Claire's voice dripped false sympathy. Didn't you know about Eleanor? Stage 4. She's been holding on just long enough to set this all in motion, to bring everything into the light before both our mothers take their secrets to the grave. Sophie grabbed my arm as I swayed. Kylie, TikTok, sister dear, Claire continued. 2 dying mothers, 2 desperate fathers, and 15 years of lies unraveling. Shall we meet and compare notes, or should we let them all keep playing their games until it's too late? I looked at Sophie, at the photos, at Claire's face on my phone screen, my face but hardened by a different kind of pain, a different kind of betrayal. Where? I asked. Where it all began, of course. Claire's smile was audible. The cabin in the last photo. Tonight. Bring your half of the truth, and I'll bring mine. Let's see what kind of story we can piece together. The line went dead, leaving me with a choice. Chase Dad to the hospital, or meet my twin at the cabin where our family's web of lies first began to spin. The cabin's porch light flickered as I pulled up, casting uncertain shadows across Claire's face. My face. She stood perfectly still, watching me park, and I understood why people always said I was unnerving when angry. We had the same cold stare. Vivian's inside, she said as I approached, making tea like this is some kind of normal family reunion. A text lit up my phone. Liam again. At the hospital with Eleanor. She's asking for you. Where are you? I silenced the phone. Did you bring them? Claire pulled out a stack of letters. Mother's correspondence with Eleanor over the years. Quite the bedtime reading. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Your turn. I handed over the bank statements I'd photographed. We traded evidence like kids trading baseball cards, each desperate to complete our collection of family betrayals. Well. Claire rifled through the papers. Looks like Daddy Dearest was playing both sides, sending money to Mother through Eleanor while building his new life with Vivian. And your half, I asked. Even better. Vivian knew about Mother being alive the whole time. She used it to blackmail Dad into the marriage. She wanted a ready-made family, and she got one, plus a backup daughter in case the first one proved difficult. The porch light buzzed, then steadied. Through the cabin window, I could see Vivian moving around the kitchen, her movements precise and controlled like always. She's not what you think, Claire said, watching my expression. Or maybe she is. Depends which version of Vivian you got, the smothering mother or the cruel stepmother. Why did you really call me here? Because in exactly 6 months we turned 25. Mother's fortune splits between us, unless one of us isn't around to claim it. She let that hang in the air. Vivian's been quite chatty about contingency plans. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sophie. Eleanor says don't trust anyone, not even me. Something about the inheritance being more complicated than we thought. Shall we? Claire gestured to the door. Vivian's waiting with her tea and her tales about how she was just trying to protect us all these years. And you believe her? I believe she's terrified of losing control. Just like Dad, just like Eleanor, with her deathbed manipulations. Claire's smile turned sharp. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Inside, Vivian had arranged everything perfectly. 3 cups, 3 saucers, 3 small cookies on bone china plates. Her hands shook slightly as she poured. My girls, she said softly, finally together. Save it, Claire and I said simultaneously, then shared a look of mutual disgust at our synchronicity. You don't understand. Vivian set down the teapot carefully. Your mother, she wasn't well after you were born. Postpartum psychosis. She wanted to... She stopped, swallowed. Mark and I were protecting you. By separating us, I demanded. By lying about her death. By giving you both a chance at a normal life. Vivian's voice hardened. But Eleanor never accepted that. She kept interfering, kept sending money to your mother's treatments, kept threatening to tell you both everything. My phone buzzed one final time. A photo from Liam. Eleanor in her hospital bed, looking frail but determined, holding up a handwritten note. The cabin is a trap. Vivian knows about the real Will. Don't, Claire said sharply as I reached for my phone. Whatever it is, it can wait. We need to finish this. Vivian's tea sat untouched, steam rising like accusations. Outside, a car crunched on gravel, headlights sweeping across the windows. Right on time, Claire murmured. Who did you call? I demanded, but Claire just smiled, that same cold smile I'd seen in my mirror countless times. Everyone, she said simply. Dad, Eleanor's lawyer, the police. Let's have it all out in the open, shall we? Every lie, every manipulation, every secret about what really happened the night they separated us. Vivian's teacup clattered against its saucer. Claire, we agreed to nothing, Claire cut her off. You raised me to be exactly like you, remember? Calculating, patient, willing to do whatever it takes to win. She turned to me. The question is, dear sister, which one of us did they raise better, and which one of us deserves to survive this night? The headlights outside went dark, car doors slammed, and I realized, with sudden clarity, that I wasn't the only one seeking revenge in this cabin full of mirrors and lies. Dad burst through the cabin door first, followed by Eleanor's lawyer, a thin man clutching a leather briefcase like a shield. The sight of Claire and me together made Dad stumble, his practiced charm cracking completely. My God, he whispered. Quite the family resemblance, isn't it? Claire's voice dripped acid. Though I got Vivian's ruthlessness while Kylie here got Mother's moral compass. Pity, really. Vivian stood, smoothing her skirt. Mark, I can explain. The real will, I interrupted, holding up my phone with Eleanor's warning. What's in it? The lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we should... Tell them, Eleanor's voice carried from the doorway. She stood there, supported by Liam, looking frail but fierce. Tell them what you've been hiding, Mark, about Sarah's condition for the inheritance. Dad's face went ash grey. Mother, you need to be in the hospital. Sarah's condition, Eleanor continued, her voice strengthening, was that her fortune would go to whichever daughter chose to care for her in her final days. Not split between them, not controlled by guardians. One choice, one heir. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. That's why they separated us, Claire said softly, so neither of us could make that choice. But now Mother's dying, I added, the pieces clicking into place. And we're almost 25. And Vivian made sure I found out first. Claire's smile turned vicious. Gave me a head start to the cabin where Mother's been hiding all these years. Didn't you, Vivian? Vivian's hands trembled around her teacup. I was protecting you both. You were protecting yourself, Eleanor cut in. Because if the girls found Sarah, they'd learn about your role in their separation, about the threats you made to keep me quiet, about the money you've been stealing from Sarah's care fund. The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulling out documents. Mrs. Bennett, you should know that the police are... A gunshot cracked through the cabin. The lawyer dropped his briefcase, papers scattering like startled birds. Claire held a small pistol, smoke curling from the barrel. That was a warning, she said calmly. The next one won't be aimed at the ceiling. Claire, Dad stepped forward, hands raised. Whatever Vivian told you, she told me everything. About Mother's illness, about how you chose Vivian over your own wife, about the night you helped fake Mother's death because it was easier than dealing with her depression. Claire's hand stayed steady on the gun. But mostly she told me about the money. All that lovely money, just waiting for one worthy daughter. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from Sophie. Sarah's gone. Eleanor just got the call. I'm so sorry. Too late, I whispered, showing Claire the message. We're too late. Claire laughed, a broken sound that mirrored the fractures in our family. No, sister dear, we're right on time, because now there's no choice to make, no mother to care for, just an inheritance up for grabs, and a cabin full of people who've lied to us our entire lives. Claire, please. Vivian stepped forward. I raised you. You used me, Claire's voice cracked. Just like you used Kylie. Just like you used everyone. And now... She swung the gun toward Vivian. I moved without thinking, knocking Claire's arm up as the second shot rang out. The bullet splintered wood somewhere above us. We grappled for the gun, mirror images locked in combat, while our family watched in horror. Stop! Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. Sarah's last letter. Show them, Mark. Show them what this fortune has really cost us all. Dad reached into his jacket with shaking hands, pulling out the worn envelope I'd seen at my apartment, the one that had disappeared. Your mother knew, he said quietly. She knew what the money would do to our family. That's why she wrote this. To warn us. To stop exactly this from happening. Claire's grip on the gun loosened just enough. I wrenched it away, stepping back as she laughed again. That same broken sound that could have been mine under different circumstances. Read it, Claire demanded. Read what Mother knew about the monsters we'd become. I held the gun on her as Dad opened the envelope, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unfold the paper. The cabin fell silent, except for Eleanor's labored breathing and the sound of ancient paper crackling, a letter from the dead about to judge the living. Mom's handwriting flowed across the yellowed page, steady and sure. My dearest daughters, if you're reading this, then the money has already poisoned our family beyond recognition. Claire's laugh caught in her throat. I kept the gun trained on her, but my hand trembled. The fortune was never meant to divide you, Dad read, his voice cracking. It was meant to bring you together. The clause about choosing one heir, it was a test. I knew what greed could do to people. I'd seen it destroy my own family. Skip to the end, Vivian snapped, but Eleanor raised a withered hand. Let him finish. The real inheritance, Dad continued, isn't money at all. It's the truth. About who you are. About why I had to leave. About the choice I made the night everything changed. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. Sarah knew. She knew what Vivian and I were planning. She wrote this the night before we separated you. The night you drugged her and declared her mentally unfit, Eleanor said quietly. The night you stole her children and her dignity, all because you couldn't handle her postpartum depression. Claire lunged for the letter. I blocked her, but she wasn't reaching for the gun. She was reaching for Dad. Her fingers closed around his throat. You killed her, she snarled. Not literally, but you killed everything she was. Everything we could have been. Claire, Vivian stepped forward. I raised you better than... You raised me to be a weapon. Claire spun toward her, releasing Dad. Someone who could hurt Kylie when the time came. Someone who could eliminate the competition for the inheritance. Well, congratulations. Here's your perfect daughter, ready to kill for money she doesn't even want anymore. The gun felt heavy in my hand. What do you mean, doesn't want? Because it was never about the money, was it? Claire's voice broke. It was about them. About making them feel what we felt, lost, betrayed, broken. Eleanor moved forward, each step clearly painful. Sarah knew this would happen. That's why she left something else. Something only I knew about. She pulled an envelope from her pocket, newer, crisp. The real will, the one she wrote after she recovered, after she rebuilt her life in secret. The one that leaves everything to charity unless... Unless what? Vivian demanded. Unless her daughters choose each other over the money. Eleanor's eyes met mine. Unless they prove they're better than the greed that destroyed their family. A sound escaped Claire, half laugh, half sob. That's why you brought us here, all of us, so we could choose. Choose to be sisters, I finished, or choose to be enemies. The gun lowered slowly between us. Claire stared at it, then at me, then at the letter still trembling in Dad's hands. She recovered, Claire whispered. She got better, and they still kept us apart. They still lost, Eleanor cut in. Because here you are, together at last. The question is, what will you do with that truth? Vivian moved suddenly, reaching for something in her purse. I raised the gun again, but Claire was faster. She knocked Vivian's hand away, sending a second gun skittering across the floor. Always have a backup plan, Claire said bitterly. Isn't that what you taught me, Mother? The cabin fell silent except for Eleanor's labored breathing and the sound of sirens in the distance. Someone had called the police after the gunshot. Choose, Eleanor said simply. Claire looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since I'd arrived. I saw myself reflected in her eyes, all the pain, all the anger, all the years of manipulation and lies. But I saw something else too, something that looked like hope. I set the gun down on the table between us. I choose my sister, I said quietly. Claire's hands shook as she reached for the gun, not to take it, but to slide it further away. I choose mine. Eleanor smiled, tears in her eyes, as she opened the final envelope. Then let me show you what your mother really left you. Not money, not revenge, but something far more valuable. The sirens grew closer as Eleanor began to read, her voice steady despite her illness. And as the truth finally emerged, I realized Mum had known all along what would heal our broken family. Not wealth, not vengeance, but the simple, devastating power of choosing love over hate. Eleanor's funeral was small, just me, Claire, Liam, and Sophie. Dad didn't come, neither did Vivian, who was awaiting trial for financial fraud and attempted assault. The autumn wind scattered leaves across Eleanor's fresh grave, each one a secret finally laid to rest. She left us one last letter, Claire said, pulling an envelope from her coat. Said we should read it together after. I touched the headstone, tracing Eleanor's name. Next to it stood our mother's marker. Empty all these years, now finally bearing witness to truth. Sarah Mitchell had died 3 days after Eleanor, as if waiting just long enough to know her daughters had chosen right. "Read it," Liam said quietly. He'd been staying with me since everything happened, learning to navigate this new reality where his sisters were twins and his parents were strangers. Claire's hands shook slightly as she opened the envelope. "My dear granddaughters, if you're reading this, you've already made the choice your mother hoped you would. But there's one last secret I've kept." She stopped, colour draining from her face. "What is it?" I asked. "The fortune isn't gone," Claire whispered. "Eleanor transferred it all into a new trust, one that only activates if we work together." She writes, "The money was never the poison, it was the greed it inspired. Now it's yours to use differently, to heal instead of hurt, to build instead of break." Sophie touched my shoulder gently. "What will you do?" I looked at Claire, my mirror, my opposite, my sister. We'd spent the past week learning each other, discovering how the same wounds had scarred us differently. Her anger had turned outward, mine inward. Her revenge had been loud, mine quiet. But we'd both been searching for the same thing: connection. "There's a women's shelter downtown," I said slowly. "They help mothers dealing with postpartum depression, like Mom." Claire nodded. "And a legal fund for families torn apart by custody battles, children separated from siblings." "Eleanor knew," Liam said. "She knew you'd choose this." A police car pulled up to the cemetery gates. Detective Morris stepped out, the same officer who'd responded to the cabin incident. She'd been surprisingly understanding about everything, once Eleanor explained the full story. "They're moving Vivian to County," she called over. "Thought you should know. She's asking to talk to you both. Says she has more to tell you about the night you were separated." Claire's hand found mine, squeezing tight. "No more secrets," she said firmly. "We have the truth we need." I squeezed back, remembering Mum's final letter. "The past will echo through your lives, my daughters, but you choose which echoes to answer. The trust requires both our signatures," Claire continued. "Both our voices, both our choices, always." Like Mum wanted all along, I realized. She knew the only way to break the cycle was to force us to work together, to choose each other, over and over again. Detective Morris waited patiently by her car. Behind her, I could see Dad's familiar silhouette approaching the cemetery, hesitant, uncertain, still carrying his own echoes of guilt and grief. "Ready?" Claire asked, but she wasn't looking at the trust papers in her hand. She was looking at Dad's approaching figure, at the weight of forgiveness neither of us was quite prepared to offer. "Not yet," I answered honestly, "but we'll get there." Sophie and Liam stepped back, giving us space as we turned to face our father together. The trust papers crinkled in Claire's pocket. Not an inheritance anymore, but a responsibility. A chance to turn vengeance into healing, betrayal into growth. "Girls," Dad started, his voice breaking. "I don't expect—" "Just listen," Claire cut him off, her tone firm but not cruel. "We have something to tell you about Mom, about who she really was, and who we've chosen to become." The autumn wind picked up again, scattering more leaves across Eleanor's grave. But this time they didn't feel like secrets anymore. They felt like possibilities, scattered wide and free, waiting to take root in whatever soil we chose to plant them in. Some echoes, I was learning, don't have to hurt. Some can heal if you let them. If you choose them, again and again, until the sound of love drowns out the memory of pain.
I walked through the glass doors of Blackwell Architectural Partners for what might be the last time. 20 years of dedication reduced to a cardboard box of personal items. My design portfolio remained on the firm's servers, my intellectual property now claimed by the company my own mother had founded. "They're waiting for you in the boardroom, Sophia," her assistant said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, straightening my charcoal blazer before entering the lion's den. Around the polished conference table sat the board of directors, with my cousin Victor at the head, a position that should have been mine. "Ah, Sophia, thank you for joining us." Victor's smile never reached his eyes. At 42, he had my mother's sharp features but none of her vision. I trust you've received the transition documents. You mean my termination papers? I kept my voice level despite the anger threatening to boil over. Yes, I've seen them. Excellent. He glanced at the other board members, all men he'd appointed after my mother's retirement last year. The board feels Blackwell needs to move in a more commercial direction. Your focus on sustainable design, while admirable, isn't profitable enough in today's market. Sustainable architecture is the future, I countered. Our Hudson project will generate 30% more revenue than projected specifically because of its environmental innovations. Victor waved his hand dismissively. The Hudson project was a fluke. Clients want predictable designs with proven returns, not experimental green buildings that cost more upfront. Mother always said. Aunt Margaret is enjoying retirement in Provence, Victor interrupted. She's entrusted the company to me now. And frankly, Sophia, having a woman as lead architect was fine in the early 2000s when it made us look progressive. But our Middle Eastern and Asian clients prefer dealing with male leadership. The casual sexism stunned me into momentary silence. I'd heard whispers of these sentiments but never expected them spoken so plainly. Is that all? I finally asked, my hands clenched beneath the table. Your severance package is generous, one of the board members offered, looking uncomfortable. 6 months' salary, provided you sign the non-compete agreement. Non-compete, I echoed. Victor smiled thinly. Standard procedure. You won't be able to work for any architectural firm in the Northeast for 2 years. We can't have you taking our clients, can we? I stood up, gathering my dignity. I'll have my lawyer review the documents. Don't bother fighting this, Sophia, Victor called as I reached the door. Blackwell was always too big for you to handle alone. I walked out without responding, past colleagues who averted their gazes. Only my assistant Rachel met my eyes, her own red-rimmed with tears. I don't understand, she whispered, following me to my office. Your mother built this company around your designs. The sustainable division is our fastest-growing segment. Victor has always been threatened by success he didn't create himself, I said, packing my awards and photos. I paused at the framed image of my mother and me at the opening of our first LEED Platinum certified building. We were both beaming, champagne glasses raised in triumph. What will you do now? Rachel asked. I carefully wrapped the photo in tissue paper. I'm not sure yet, but whatever it is, I'll build it on my own terms. That evening, I sat in my loft apartment overlooking the city skyline, a view I might not be able to afford much longer. The non-compete agreement lay unsigned on my coffee table next to a glass of Cabernet. If I signed, I'd receive financial security but lose my professional identity for 2 years. If I refused, I faced potential litigation from a company with deep pockets. My phone rang, displaying my best friend Nadia's name. A brilliant structural engineer, she left Blackwell last year to start her own engineering consultancy. I just heard, she said when I answered. Victor is a fool. A fool with power, I replied, taking a sip of wine. He's offering me a decent severance package if I sign away my right to work in architecture for 2 years. Don't you dare sign that, she snapped. Listen, can you meet me for dinner? There's something I want to discuss. 2 hours later, we sat at a quiet corner table in our favorite restaurant, empty plates pushed aside as Nadia outlined her proposal. I've been thinking about expanding beyond structural engineering, she explained, showing me figures on her tablet. Creating a full-service sustainable design firm, but I need a visionary architect to make it work. Someone with impeccable credentials in green building. I studied the business plan she drafted. This is ambitious, Nadia. It's the perfect time, she insisted. The market for sustainable architecture is growing exponentially. Traditional firms like Blackwell are too conservative to capitalize on it fully. We could create something revolutionary. I'd need startup capital, I mused, my mind already calculating figures. And I have to fight the non-compete. My firm is already established. You wouldn't be competing. You'd be joining as a partner in a different type of business. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. We could call it terraform design, building the future by respecting the earth. For the first time since Victor had called me into that boardroom, I felt a spark of hope. Let me think about it. Don't think too long, Nadia cautioned. I already have 3 potential clients asking for exactly what we could offer together. The next morning, I called my mother's old friend James Chen, one of the city's top business attorneys. After explaining my situation, I asked about the non-compete. These agreements are often more intimidation than substance, he said after reviewing the document, especially in creative fields that can't legally prevent you from earning a living in your profession. So I don't have to sign. I wouldn't. And if you joined an established firm as a partner, focusing specifically on sustainable architecture, you'd have a strong case that you're not directly competing with Blackwell's primary business model. Victor would still sue, I pointed out. Probably, James agreed. But would a public lawsuit claiming sustainable architecture threatens their business be good publicity for them? I smiled for the first time in days. No, it wouldn't. Your mother was one of my first clients, James said more gently. Margaret always said you had twice her talent and 3 times her stubbornness. She'd want you to fight. I left his office with renewed determination. By the end of the week, I had declined the severance package, returned the unsigned non-compete agreement, and scheduled a meeting with Nadia and her financial advisor. Terraform Design was born on paper a month later. We secured a small office space in a renovated warehouse, ironically, a building I had designed for Blackwell 5 years earlier as one of their first sustainable renovation projects. Rachel joined us as office manager, bringing her organizational skills and insider knowledge of Blackwell's operations. Victor is furious, she informed me gleefully on her first day. He's already threatened to sue, but the board is getting nervous. 2 major clients have asked specifically about the sustainable division, and they had to admit you're no longer with the firm. Word spread quickly through the architectural community. By our 3rd month, we'd secured 5 projects, small commercial renovations focused on energy efficiency and sustainable materials. They weren't the prestigious downtown skyscrapers I'd designed at Blackwell, but each one represented freedom and the future. True to Rachel's prediction, Victor's lawyers sent a cease and desist letter claiming I had violated the spirit of professional conduct by establishing a competing business without signing the non-compete. James responded with a masterfully worded letter that essentially invited them to proceed with legal action if they wanted to publicly position themselves against sustainable building practices. They didn't pursue it further. Our breakthrough came unexpectedly. The Fitzgerald Foundation, a major environmental nonprofit, announced a competition for their new headquarters, a zero-carbon building that would showcase the possibilities of sustainable architecture. The budget was substantial, and the publicity would be invaluable. This is exactly what we need, Nadia said during our strategy session. But we're competing against established firms with more resources. We have something they don't, I countered. Complete commitment to the mission. This isn't a marketing opportunity for us, it's our entire reason for existing. We worked around the clock for weeks, pouring everything we had learned into the proposal. Our design incorporated living walls, rainwater harvesting, solar integration, and innovative ventilation systems that would eliminate the need for conventional heating and cooling. The materials were locally sourced, with carbon footprints meticulously calculated and offset. When the shortlist was announced, Terraform Design was among the 5 finalists. So was Blackwell Architectural Partners. The morning of the final presentation, I arrived at the Fitzgerald Foundation's current offices to find Victor waiting in the lobby. He looked impeccable as always, but there was a tightness around his eyes I recognized as stress. Sophia, he acknowledged coolly, I'm surprised you made it this far. Are you really? I asked. Sustainable design was always my specialty, not yours. The board is considering legal action, you know. This little venture of yours is a clear attempt to capitalize on Blackwell's reputation. I smiled. Terraform has its own reputation now. How is Blackwell doing, by the way? I heard the Chen Development Group dropped you from their office tower project. His jaw tightened. Temporary setback. Mr. Blackwell, Ms. Reyes, the receptionist called. The committee will see you now. We entered the boardroom together, presenting one after the other. Victor's design was technically proficient but safe, a conventionally attractive building with some green features added like accessories. When my turn came, I spoke passionately about architecture as environmental stewardship, about buildings that gave more than they took. I showed them not just renderings but systems, organisms working in harmony. A week later, Rachel burst into my office waving her phone. We got it. The Fitzgerald Commission is ours. The next few months were a whirlwind. The Fitzgerald headquarters became our calling card, attracting attention from clients who wanted more than token sustainability features. We hired 3 more architects and 2 additional engineers. Nadia expanded her team. Our little warehouse office filled with drafting tables, material samples, and the energy of people inspired by purpose. 9 months after we opened our doors, I received an unexpected visitor. My mother stood in our reception area, elegant as always in a linen suit, her silver hair cut in the same precise bob she'd worn for decades. "Mother," I said, surprised. "I thought you were in France." "I fly back occasionally to check on things." Her eyes took in our office space, the exposed brick walls covered with design renderings, the staff gathered around a conference table reviewing blueprints. "Victor didn't mention how successful you've become." "Victor and I don't exactly exchange Christmas cards." She smiled slightly. "No, I suppose not." She walked to a display model of the Fitzgerald headquarters. "This is extraordinary work, Sophia. Truly visionary." "Thank you," I said, warmth spreading through me at her praise. "Would you like the full tour?" As we walked through the office, introducing her to the team, explaining our current projects, I saw her expression shift from polite interest to genuine excitement. "You've created something special here," she said when we returned to my office. "Something I always hoped Blackwell might become." "You could have steered it in this direction," I pointed out. "You were the CEO." She sighed, sitting in a chair across from my desk. "I made a mistake with Victor. I thought the company needed traditional leadership to grow. I was wrong." She met my eyes directly. "The board asked me to return as an advisor. Blackwell is struggling. Victor's leadership hasn't produced the results they expected." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Blackwell had been my home for most of my professional life. "I've reviewed your recent projects," my mother continued. "The Fitzgerald headquarters, the Taylor renovation, the University Research Center. You're doing the work I always believed in." "We're just getting started," I told her. "I know." She reached into her handbag and removed a slim folder. "That's why I'm here. I'd like to invest in Terraform Design." I stared at her. "What?" "A significant investment," she clarified, sliding the folder across my desk. "Enough to fund expansion, hire more staff, take on larger projects." I opened the folder. The figure on the investment proposal made me blink. "This is substantial." "It's approximately half my personal portfolio," she said calmly. "I believe in what you're building, Sophia. I always have." "What about Blackwell? Victor?" "Victor will remain at Blackwell, with more appropriate oversight from the board. As for me," she smiled, "I think I'm ready for a new challenge. If you'll have me, I'd like to join Terraform as a senior advisor. No controlling interest, no management role. Just experience to offer when requested." I felt tears threatening. The prodigal mother returns. She reached across the desk to take my hand. The mother who finally recognizes her daughter has surpassed her. 6 months later, we broke ground on our largest project yet, a mixed-use development combining affordable housing with commercial space, all built to the highest sustainability standards. The investment from my mother had allowed us to expand to 30 employees and move to larger offices. She had proven an invaluable advisor, opening doors with her industry connections while respecting the vision Nadia and I had established. At the groundbreaking ceremony, I stood with my team, hard hats on, ceremonial shovels in hand. Across the street, I noticed a familiar figure watching. Victor, looking less polished than he once had, observed from a distance before turning away. "Should we have invited him?" Nadia asked, following my gaze. "I did," I admitted. He declined. My mother joined us, camera in hand. "Family photo before the press arrives?" As we gathered together, Nadia, Rachel, my mother, and the core team that had believed in Terraform from the beginning, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path hadn't been what I expected, but it had led to something better than I could have imagined. "To building the future," I said, raising my shovel like a toast. "To building it right," my mother added. Later that evening, back in my office, I arranged 3 photos on my desk. One of my mother and me from the early Blackwell days, one of Nadia and me signing our partnership agreement, and the newest, our entire Terraform team at the groundbreaking, standing on the soil where our vision would take physical form. 3 chapters of a career, 3 versions of myself, each one necessary to create what stood now, not just a business, but a legacy built on principles that would endure long after the buildings themselves. I turned to my computer and opened the preliminary designs for our next project. After all, the blueprint for the future was still being drawn. When my father's will was read, my sister immediately claimed the $100,000 in savings for herself, mockingly leaving me with what she called that dirty shed in the countryside. What she didn't know was that Dad, always the clever planner, had hidden something valuable in a secret compartment that would completely change both our fortunes. 6 months later, my sister showed up at my doorstep with a desperate look in her eyes, asking if I had won the lottery, not realizing that the inheritance she had so smugly dismissed was worth 5 times what she had taken. My name is Rebecca, and 3 weeks ago, my father passed away after battling a prolonged illness. At his funeral, I found myself wondering if I could have done more for him during his final months. Despite visiting him regularly at the hospital, calling him daily, and supporting my mother through this difficult time, I still felt a lingering sense of regret. I wish I could have shown him his grandchildren, I whispered to my mother as we sat in the front row of the chapel. It had been a dream of his to see the next generation of our family. You did everything you could, Rebecca, my mother reassured me, squeezing my hand. Your father was so proud of you. My husband Thomas and I had been married for 4 years, but we had decided to wait on starting a family until we were more financially stable. Now, I couldn't help but wish we had made different choices. The service was beautiful, with many of Dad's colleagues and friends sharing stories about his kindness and integrity. My father had run a moderately successful automotive parts business for 30 years before retiring 5 years ago to focus on his hobby, restoring vintage motorcycles in a small shed next to the country home where I grew up. As we were leaving the chapel, I noticed my sister Amanda standing alone near the exit. We had once been close, but our relationship had deteriorated significantly over the past year. While I had rearranged my work schedule and driven the 2 hours from the city every weekend to help care for our father, Amanda had visited only twice during his entire illness. You didn't have to come today, I said stiffly as I approached her. He was my father too, she replied, adjusting the designer sunglasses that probably cost more than what my mother spent on the funeral flowers. Amanda had always been focused on appearances and status. After college, she had married Richard, the heir to a successful technology company, and embraced a lifestyle that revolved around luxury and social standing. Our different values had created a widening gap between us, but Dad's illness had turned that gap into a chasm. You could have shown that by visiting him while he was still alive, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. I was busy, Rebecca. Some of us have important careers and social obligations. And some of us have basic human decency, I replied before walking away, not wanting to create a scene at my father's funeral. 1 week later, we gathered at my parents' home for the reading of the will. My mother had contacted Mr. Patterson, Dad's attorney, who arrived carrying a simple manila envelope. I've brought the will as requested, Mr. Patterson said, settling into an armchair in the living room. Your husband called me a few weeks before he passed away to update it. Amanda leaned forward eagerly. I heard Dad left quite an inheritance, she said, not even attempting to hide her interest. It's not all for you, Amanda, I responded sharply. I know that, she snapped back, glaring at me. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the tension between us. Ladies, please, let's proceed in a respectful manner. He opened the envelope and removed a single sheet of paper. The will was straightforward. Our mother would inherit the family home and the surrounding property, while the remaining assets, consisting of approximately $100,000 in savings and a storage shed where Dad kept his motorcycle collection, were to be divided between Amanda and me. The savings and the storage shed should be fairly divided between my daughters, Mr. Patterson read from the document. I'll take the cash, Amanda declared immediately, not even waiting for discussion. How much is it exactly? The savings amount to $100,000, Mr. Patterson replied after consulting his notes. Amanda's eyes lit up, and she turned to me with a smug smile. You can have the storage shed. What's even in there anyway? Just Dad's old junk, right? I was about to protest when Mr. Patterson continued. The shed includes the building, a small plot of land, approximately 65 square feet, and all contents within. Contents? Amanda asked, suddenly showing renewed interest. What kind of contents? Mr. Patterson placed several photographs on the coffee table. These show the shed and its contents. We all leaned forward to examine the pictures. The exterior looked like a typical weathered shed, and the interior photos showed basic tools, some motorcycle parts, and general workshop equipment, nothing that appeared particularly valuable. "I don't want that," Amanda said dismissively, wrinkling her nose. "I'll definitely take the cash." I felt a surge of indignation. "Wait a minute. That's not a fair division at all." "Oh, please," Amanda scoffed. "You were always Dad's favorite. Now you want his money too." "That's not true," I protested. "I just think we should divide things equally." "Well, I don't want some dirty shed filled with motorcycle parts. You can have it," Amanda insisted. "I'm taking the cash." Our mother, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke up. "As long as Amanda won't complain later, I have no objection to her taking the money and Rebecca taking the shed." "Why would I complain about getting $100,000? Amanda laughed. "There's no way that shed is worth anything close to that." Mr. Patterson produced documents for us to sign, confirming our agreement to the division of assets. Amanda eagerly scrawled her signature, then looked at me expectantly. "Come on, Rebecca. You care more about Dad's sentimental items than money, right? Sign it." Reluctantly, I signed the agreement, feeling that I had somehow been maneuvered into accepting an unfair arrangement. As Mr. Patterson gathered his papers, Amanda made a show of checking her designer watch. "Well, if that's all, I have a luncheon to attend. Richard is waiting in the car." After Amanda left, I turned to my mother in frustration. "Mom, why didn't you help me? That wasn't a fair division at all." My mother smiled mysteriously. "I think you'll find your father was a fair man, Rebecca. Sometimes you need to look a little deeper to find the true value of things." The next day, I drove out to the storage shed with the key Mr. Patterson had given me. It was located about 10 minutes from my parents' home, next to the small field where my father had spent countless hours working on his motorcycle projects. As I approached the weathered structure, memories flooded back, helping Dad polish chrome parts on summer afternoons, bringing him lunch when he lost track of time, listening to his stories about each motorcycle he restored. The shed might not be worth $100,000, but it contained something more valuable to me, a connection to my father. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the familiar smells of motor oil, metal, and the polish Dad always used. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the small window. Several partially restored motorcycles sat in various states of completion, surrounded by tools and parts organized in Dad's meticulously labeled system. "I miss you, Dad," I whispered, running my hand along one of the vintage gas tanks. As I moved around the small space, something felt odd. The interior dimensions seemed smaller than what the exterior of the building would suggest. I stepped outside and walked around the perimeter, counting my steps. When I reached the back of the shed, partially obscured by overgrown bushes, I discovered something surprising, a second door. "That's strange," I murmured, pushing aside branches to examine it. This rear entrance was not visible from inside the shed, which meant there had to be a false wall creating a hidden compartment. Excitement building, I searched through the main space for additional keys, eventually finding a small key taped under one of the workbenches. It fit perfectly into the lock of the rear door, which opened with a satisfying click. The hidden space was narrow but extended the full width of the shed. Centered in this secret compartment stood a large floor safe, the same one that had once occupied the corner of Dad's office at his business. "Oh, Dad," I laughed, tears welling in my eyes. Always with the surprises. I remembered that Dad had given me a small key on a chain for my 30th birthday, saying cryptically, "You'll know when to use this." I had kept it in my jewelry box, assuming it was just a sentimental gesture. Now, I realized its purpose. I rushed home to retrieve the key, returning to find that it fit perfectly into the safe's lock. As the heavy door swung open, I gasped at what I saw inside. The safe contained dozens of carefully preserved vintage watches, Rolexes, Patek Philippes, Omegas, each nestled in its own velvet-lined compartment. There were also several leather-bound notebooks detailing each acquisition, its history, and its market value. According to Dad's meticulous records, this collection represented his true passion investment over 30 years. With trembling hands, I called my mother. "Mom, you need to see this." After consulting with a professional appraiser recommended by Mr. Patterson, I learned that my father's watch collection was worth approximately $500,000. 5 times the amount of the cash inheritance Amanda had so eagerly claimed. The appraiser explained that many of these timepieces were rare models that had appreciated significantly in value over the years. Dad had apparently been quietly investing in them throughout his career, documenting each purchase with the precision of a museum curator. Your father had an exceptional eye, the appraiser told me admiringly. Some of these pieces are among the most sought after by serious collectors. Following my mother's advice, I consulted with an accountant about the inheritance tax implications. He recommended selling some of the watches to cover the tax obligations while keeping the pieces with the most sentimental value. I kept Dad's everyday pocket watch, a modest Longines that had belonged to his father, along with a few other pieces that figured prominently in my memories of him. The rest I sold through a reputable auction house, using part of the proceeds to establish a scholarship fund in Dad's name at the local community college where he had taken business courses as a young man. With my financial future now secure, Thomas and I decided the time was right to start the family we had been planning. We also sent thank you gifts to the relatives and friends who had supported our parents during Dad's illness. Modest but thoughtful gift cards enclosed with handwritten notes of appreciation. 6 months after the will had been settled, I was surprised to find Amanda on my doorstep one evening, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "This is unexpected," I said, reluctantly inviting her in. "I was in the neighborhood," she replied unconvincingly, glancing around my living room with poorly disguised curiosity. After serving coffee, I waited for her to reveal the real purpose of her visit. She fidgeted with her cup before finally blurting out, "Did you win the lottery or something?" "What?" "No," I replied, confused by the question. "Then did Thomas get some huge promotion or bonus?" I shook my head. "Amanda, what are you talking about?" "Money," she exclaimed, her composure slipping. "You're suddenly spending money. Aunt Patricia showed me the expensive gift card you sent her. You're remodeling your kitchen. You bought a new car. Where is it coming from?" I couldn't help but smile as understanding dawned. It came from Dad's shed. "The shed? What are you talking about?" I explained about the hidden room, the safe, and the valuable watch collection our father had assembled over decades. Amanda's face paled as I detailed the collection's worth. $500,000, she stammered. "At least," I confirmed. The final auction exceeded the appraiser's estimates. Amanda sat in stunned silence, the implications sinking in. She had smugly claimed what she thought was the more valuable portion of the inheritance, only to discover she had received just a fraction of the estate's true worth. But that's not fair," she finally sputtered. "We should split it. Though we'll set to divide the assets fairly. Though we'll divided the savings and the shed between us," I reminded her. "You chose the savings. I got the shed and everything inside it, including the safe and its contents. You signed the agreement, remember? You even made me promise not to complain later." "That's because I didn't know about the watches," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "Dad tricked me." "Did he?" I asked quietly. "Or did he know exactly what he was doing?" "You never visited him during his illness, Amanda. You were too busy with your important career and social obligations. Maybe he wanted to make sure his legacy went to someone who valued more than just money." Amanda's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at it, then answered with obvious reluctance. "Yes, Richard, I'm still at Rebecca's. No, I haven't asked her yet. I know we need it, but..." She abruptly ended the call, looking embarrassed. "Ask me what?" I pressed. Amanda sighed deeply. "Richard's company is having some financial difficulties. We've overextended ourselves. The inheritance money is gone, and we have some significant debts. I was hoping you might help us out." "Let me get this straight," I said incredulously. "You took the cash, spent it all in 6 months, and now you want me to bail you out with the money from Dad's watches?" "We're family," she said weakly. "Isn't that what family does?" I thought about all the times I had driven to the hospital while Amanda made excuses, about Dad working tirelessly to build his business and collection while she dismissed his passion as playing with junk, about the choice she had made to value money over sentimental connections. "No, Amanda. That's not what family does. Family shows up. Family cares. Family values more than just dollar signs." She left shortly after, anger and resentment evident in every rigid line of her posture. Later that week, I learned from my mother that Richard had filed for bankruptcy and that Amanda was frantically selling her designer clothes and accessories to cover their basic expenses. New beginnings. 3 months later, as spring breathed new life into the countryside around my parents' home, I shared some news with my mother over tea in her garden. "I'm pregnant, Mom." Her eyes filled with tears as she embraced me. "Your father would have been so happy." "I know," I said, feeling both joy and sadness. "I wish he could have known." "I think he did know, in a way," she replied thoughtfully. "That's why he left you the shed and everything in it, to secure your future and the future of his grandchildren." Thomas and I had decided to move closer to my mother's home, purchasing a comfortable house nearby with part of the proceeds from the watch sale. We were converting one of the rooms into a nursery, painting it the soft yellow color Dad had always associated with sunlight and new beginnings. In our backyard, we built a small shed modeled after Dad's workshop. Inside, I displayed the pocket watch and a few other pieces I had kept from his collection, along with photographs of him working on his motorcycles. It would be a place where our child could one day learn of the grandfather they never met, but whose planning and foresight had helped shape their life. As for Amanda, I heard through family that she had found a job as an assistant in a retail store, a humbling change from her previous lifestyle. Richard had filed for divorce, unwilling to weather financial hardship with her. One afternoon, I received a letter from her, not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter. In it, she acknowledged her mistakes and expressed regret for the way she had treated our father and me. She didn't ask for money or help, just forgiveness and perhaps, someday, a chance to be part of her niece or nephew's life. I placed the letter in a drawer, not yet ready to respond but willing to consider the possibility of reconciliation. Dad had always believed in second chances and the capacity for people to change. Perhaps, in time, Amanda would demonstrate that she had learned what our father had known all along, that the true value of an inheritance isn't measured in dollars, but in the lessons, memories, and love that sustain us long after material possessions have faded away. In the quiet of evening, sitting in the garden with my hand resting on my growing belly, I could almost hear Dad's voice. "The best investments are the ones that appreciate with time, whether they're vintage watches or family bonds. Choose wisely, Becky, choose wisely." And in that moment, I knew I had.
I maintained a carefully neutral expression as Richard Bennett slid a document across the conference table toward me. "Morgan, as you know, we've been reviewing the leadership structure," he said, his voice carrying that practiced corporate sympathy that never reached his eyes. "We've decided to eliminate the creative director position. We're consolidating departments." "I see," I replied, not reaching for the severance agreement. After 8 years at Horizon Media, this wasn't entirely unexpected, but the timing was impeccable in ways Richard couldn't possibly comprehend. "We'll need you to stay on for 4 weeks to ensure a smooth transition," he continued, tapping the document with his manicured finger. "Amanda will be taking over the merged department. I'd appreciate if you could bring her up to speed on your current projects and client relationships." "Of course," I said. "I'll make sure Amanda has everything she needs." Richard's smile widened, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. "Excellent. I knew you'd be professional about this. The severance package is quite generous, 6 months' salary." I pushed for that personally. What Richard didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that I had spent the last 2 years methodically executing a plan that would culminate exactly 1 week from today. My name is Morgan Chin, and I was about to become Richard Bennett's boss. The beginning. 8 years ago, I joined Horizon Media as a senior designer with a reputation for innovative campaigns and a client list that made Richard personally recruit me. The agency had been founded 20 years earlier by Eleanor Horizon, a visionary who built the company on principles of creative excellence and respectful collaboration. Eleanor saw potential in me. Within my first year, she promoted me to creative team lead, and when she retired 3 years later, she recommended me for the creative director position. Her final advice to me still echoed in my mind: "In this industry, Morgan, your reputation and your relationships are everything. Guard them carefully." Eleanor sold her majority stake to a group of investors but maintained a 15% ownership through a family trust. Richard, who had been COO, leveraged his connections with the investors to secure the CEO position. The changes began almost immediately. Richard's vision for Horizon was dramatically different from Eleanor's. Where she had prioritized creative excellence and client relationships, Richard focused obsessively on billable hours and short-term profits. He introduced aggressive quotas, slashed professional development budgets, and began pushing out Eleanor's loyal leadership team one by one. I watched talented colleagues leave or be forced out, replaced by Richard's former associates who shared his ruthless approach to agency management. Morale plummeted, client complaints increased, our work, once award-winning, became formulaic and uninspired. During my annual review 4 years ago, Richard made his philosophy clear: creativity is a commodity, Morgan. Clients don't actually care about innovation, they care about results, and results equal profit. I disagreed fundamentally, but I kept my thoughts to myself. Instead, I began forming a plan. The strategy. It started with conversations, quiet lunches with former colleagues who had left, coffee meetings with industry partners, discreet check-ins with clients who had moved their business elsewhere. A pattern emerged in these conversations: people missed the old Horizon culture and were disappointed by what the agency had become under Richard's leadership. Eleanor Horizon herself confirmed this during a chance encounter at an industry event. "I barely recognize the place anymore," she confided, her voice tinged with regret. "The quarterly reports show profit, but at what cost? The work isn't what it used to be. Have you considered buying back your shares?" I asked carefully. Eleanor sighed. "At my age? No. But I've been disappointed with the returns from the trust. The investors promised growth that hasn't materialized." That conversation planted the seed. I began researching Horizon's financial situation, studying the publicly available information and piecing together what I could from internal documents that crossed my desk. The picture that emerged was concerning. While Richard presented rosy projections to the board, the reality was that client retention was declining, and new business wins were smaller and less prestigious than in previous years. The company was maintaining profitability only through aggressive cost-cutting and increasingly questionable billing practices. I made an appointment with my financial advisor and explained what I wanted to do. She thought I was crazy at first, but after reviewing the information I had gathered, she agreed it might be possible. Together, we created a holding company, MCH Partners, named for my initials, and developed a strategy to acquire shares in Horizon Media. I started with my own savings, buying small blocks of shares whenever they became available on the open market. I reached out to former colleagues who held employee stock, offering to buy their shares at a premium. Slowly, methodically, MCH Partners began accumulating ownership in Horizon Media. The real breakthrough came 6 months ago. I learned through industry contacts that 2 of the original investors were looking to divest their holdings, disappointed with the company's trajectory under Richard's leadership. Through my financial advisor, I arranged a meeting. "Why are you interested in a struggling agency?" one of them asked bluntly when we met. "Horizon isn't struggling because of market conditions or client demands," I explained. "It's struggling because it's lost sight of what made it successful in the first place. I believe I can restore that." After extensive negotiations and due diligence, they agreed to sell their combined 22% stake to MCH Partners. With the shares I had already accumulated and a tentative agreement with Eleanor to vote her trust shares with mine, I would have effective control of the company. All the paperwork was finalized last week. The SEC filings would become public in exactly 7 days. The present. "Morgan, did you hear what I said?" Richard's voice pulled me back to the present moment. "Yes, of course. 4 weeks transition period. Working with Amanda, I finally picked up the severance agreement. I'll review this and get back to you tomorrow." Richard stood, buttoning his jacket. "Wonderful. I know this is difficult, but I believe it's the best decision for Horizon moving forward. We need to streamline operations to stay competitive." I nodded, gathering my materials. "I understand. Change is inevitable in this industry." "Exactly," Richard said, relieved by my apparent acceptance. "I'm glad you see it that way." As I walked back to my office, I passed Lisa from HR, one of the few people who knew about my plan. "How did it go?" she whispered when Richard was out of earshot. "Exactly as expected," I replied quietly. "Is everything ready for next week?" She nodded. "The board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. All members have confirmed attendance." "Perfect. And Amanda?" Lisa frowned slightly. "Richard's bringing her in tomorrow to introduce her around. From what I've gathered, she was responsible for the aggressive cost-cutting at Portman Agency before they lost the Davis account." I sighed. Another Richard clone. "Make sure we have complete documentation of all current projects and client relationships. I want to be thoroughly prepared." That evening, I met with my core team, the people I trusted most at Horizon and had confided in about the coming changes. We gathered at Jasper's apartment, away from curious eyes at the office. "So he actually did it." Zoe, our senior copywriter, said when I told them about my termination. What an idiot. Firing you right before you become his boss is just. She shook her head, laughing. It's perfect timing, actually, I said. It gives us a clean break. After the board meeting next week, there won't be any question about the need for new leadership. Have you decided how you're going to handle it? Jasper asked. As our strategy director, he always focused on execution. I'm not going to humiliate him, I said firmly. This isn't about revenge. It's about saving the agency and restoring what made Horizon special in the first place. Some of us wouldn't mind a little humiliation, Zoe muttered, and the others chuckled. The best revenge is success, I reminded them. Now, let's go through the transition plan again. We have 1 week to prepare, and I want everything to be perfect. The week of transition. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to find Richard already showing Amanda around. She was exactly what I expected, sharply dressed, ambitious, with the kind of calculated smile that never reached her eyes. Ah, Morgan, perfect timing, Richard called out. This is Amanda Prescott, our new executive creative director. Amanda, this is Morgan Chen, who'll be helping you transition into the role. Amanda's handshake was firm. I've heard great things about your creative work, she said smoothly. I'm looking forward to learning about your team. My pleasure, I replied with equal professionalism. I've prepared an overview of our current projects and client relationships. Would you like to start with that? Over the next few days, I methodically walked Amanda through everything she would need to know, carefully observing her reactions and priorities. It became increasingly clear that she had been hired specifically to continue Richard's focus on billable hours over creative quality. She repeatedly asked about efficiency metrics and resource utilization but showed minimal interest in our creative process or client relationship management. These concept development sessions seem excessive, she noted, reviewing our project timelines. Couldn't we streamline this process? We could, I acknowledged, but we found that this collaborative approach leads to stronger concepts and fewer revisions later. Clients appreciate the thoughtfulness. Amanda made a non-committal noise and made a note on her tablet. I suspected those sessions would be the first thing cut after my departure. Meanwhile, my team was executing our transition plan flawlessly. Jasper had compiled comprehensive reports on client satisfaction and project outcomes, clearly demonstrating the correlation between thoughtful creative development and client retention. Zoe had prepared a portfolio of our most successful campaigns, annotated with client testimonials and industry recognition. Lisa from HR had discreetly gathered documentation of the declining employee satisfaction and increasing turnover under Richard's leadership, along with exit interview comments that painted a concerning picture of the agency's culture. By Tuesday evening, the day before the board meeting, everything was in place. I had completed most of my knowledge transfer to Amanda, signed my severance agreement, which contained no non-compete clause, thanks to Richard's overconfidence, and cleared out my personal items from my office. That night, I received a call from Eleanor Horizon herself. The SEC filings went public this afternoon, she said without preamble. Richard just called me in a panic, demanding to know if I knew anything about it. What did you tell him? I asked. That I look forward to tomorrow's board meeting, Eleanor replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. See you in the morning, Morgan. Sleep well. The revelation. The Horizon Media boardroom was designed to impress, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a massive table of polished walnut. I arrived 15 minutes early and took a seat at the far end, away from the head of the table where Richard would undoubtedly sit. Board members filed in gradually, nodding politely to me. Most knew me as the creative director but had no idea why I might be attending a board meeting. Richard was the last to arrive, his confidence stride faltering slightly when he saw me. Morgan, this is a board meeting. I don't think Ms. Chen was invited by the chair, interrupted Eleanor Horizon, who had just taken her seat. As the largest individual shareholder, she maintained the honorary position of board chair, though Richard had systematically diminished her influence over the years. Richard frowned but took his seat at the head of the table. Very well, let's begin with the quarterly performance review. Actually, Eleanor cut in, we have a more pressing matter to discuss. She nodded to me. Morgan, would you like to explain? I stood and distributed folders to each board member. Thank you, Eleanor. Ladies and gentlemen, as of yesterday, ownership of Horizon Media has significantly changed. MCH Partners now controls 37% of outstanding shares, with Eleanor's 15% voting with us. We represent majority control of the company. Richard's face drained of color. MCH Partners? What is this? Morgan Chen Holdings, I said simply. My holding company. The room erupted in murmurs as board members flipped through the documents confirming the share acquisition. Richard's shock quickly transformed into anger. "This is impossible," he sputtered. "You're a creative director. You can't possibly have the resources to." "Actually, Richard, I mortgaged everything I own, liquidated my retirement accounts, and took significant personal financial risk because I believe in what Horizon Media can be," I interrupted calmly. "And I'm not alone. Several former employees and clients have invested alongside me because they too believe this agency has lost its way under your leadership." One of the board members, a respected industry veteran named Thomas, spoke up. "These numbers are concerning," he said, reviewing the documentation. "Client retention down 40% over 3 years? Employee turnover at nearly double the industry average? Why haven't these metrics been included in our quarterly reviews?" Richard began a defensive explanation about alternative success metrics and strategic repositioning, but the damage was done. The board could now see clearly what I and others had observed for years. The company was being hollowed out for short-term profit at the expense of its long-term health. "I move that we vote on new leadership," Eleanor said firmly when Richard finished speaking. "I second the motion," said Thomas, his expression grave. The vote was decisive. Within 30 minutes, Richard Bennett was no longer CEO of Horizon Media. As security escorted him from the building, a protocol he himself had established for terminated executives, Richard turned to me with undisguised fury. "You planned this all along. You undermined me at every turn." I shook my head. "No, Richard, you undermined yourself when you forgot what made this agency special in the first place. It was never just about profit. It was about creating meaningful work that delivers results for our clients while respecting the talents of our team." His parting words were a threat about lawsuits and reputation damage, but we both knew there was nothing illegal about what I had done. I had simply outmaneuvered him at his own game. The rebuilding. The weeks that followed were intense but exhilarating. As the newly appointed CEO, I immediately began implementing changes to restore Horizon's creative culture while addressing the financial realities Richard had tried to obscure. Amanda, unsurprisingly, resigned when she realized the agency's direction would be fundamentally different from what she had been hired to implement. I promoted Zoe to creative director, knowing her talent and collaborative approach would help rebuild our creative reputation. Jasper became our chief strategy officer, tasked with reconnecting with former clients and articulating our renewed commitment to partnership and creative excellence. Lisa implemented improved HR policies, focusing on talent development and work-life balance, elements that had been sacrificed under Richard's leadership. Most importantly, we began rebuilding trust with our employees, our clients, and our industry partners. We were transparent about the challenges ahead and clear about our values moving forward. 3 months after the leadership change, we gathered the entire agency for a town hall meeting. The energy in the room was palpable, a mixture of optimism and determination that had been absent for years. When Eleanor Horizon founded this agency 20 years ago, I began. She built it on a simple but powerful idea, that creativity and business success aren't opposing forces, but complementary ones. That treating people with respect, both clients and colleagues, isn't just the right thing to do, it's good business. I paused, looking out at the faces of people who had weathered difficult years and were now cautiously hopeful about the future. We lost sight of that for a while. We prioritized short-term profit over long-term relationships. We valued billable hours over meaningful work. But that changes now. I unveiled our new agency manifesto, collaboratively developed by team members across all departments. It recommitted us to creative excellence, respectful collaboration, and genuine partnership with our clients. After the meeting, Eleanor found me in what had once been Richard's office, now significantly redecorated with work from our most innovative campaigns and comfortable seating for collaborative discussions. "You've done in 3 months what I feared might be impossible," she said, looking around approvingly. "The place feels like Horizon again." "We're just getting started," I replied. "There's still so much to rebuild." Eleanor smiled. "Yes, but now you're building on the right foundation." She handed me a small wrapped package. "I thought this might belong in your office now." Inside was a simple framed quote, the same one that had hung in her office during her tenure as CEO. "Creativity is not a department, it's a way of operating." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved. "I'll make sure we live up to this." The future. 1 year after taking control of Horizon Media, I stood before our team again, this time to celebrate meaningful progress. Our client retention had stabilized. We'd won back 2 major accounts that had left under Richard's leadership. Our work was once again being recognized in industry awards. Most significantly, Employee satisfaction scores had increased dramatically, and our turnover rate had dropped to well below industry average. People wanted to work at Horizon again. After the celebration, Jasper, Zoe, and Lisa joined me in my office for a quiet toast. "Remember when Richard told you creativity was just a commodity?" Zoe asked, raising her glass. "I wish he could see us now." "Actually," Lisa said with a small smile, "he can. I heard he follows all our social media accounts religiously. Apparently, he's quite bitter about our success." "That's not surprising," Jasper noted. "His new consulting venture isn't exactly thriving. Turns out his approach doesn't work so well when you don't have talented people to exploit." I raised my glass to Horizon's future, built on creativity, respect, and collaboration. As we clinked glasses, I reflected on the journey. Richard had believed he was eliminating a redundant position when he terminated me. Instead, he had catalyzed a transformation that would define his legacy as much as mine. Sometimes the most powerful position is the one nobody sees coming, the silent partner who understands that true leadership isn't about control or short-term profit, but about creating something meaningful that stands the test of time. Eleanor had taught me that lesson years ago. Now, as the steward of her legacy and the architect of Horizon's future, I intended to honor it with every decision I made. Richard had been right about one thing: change was indeed inevitable in our industry, but it was the nature of that change, rebuilding rather than dismantling, inspiring rather than intimidating, that would ultimately determine our success. The severance package that was meant to end my career had instead funded the beginning of something far more significant, a company where creativity, respect, and business success worked in harmony, just as Eleanor had always intended. As I looked out my office window at the city below, I smiled at the thought that sometimes, the best response to being underestimated isn't anger or resentment, but quiet determination and a better vision for the future. When you grow up as Alexander Wellington's son, every decision is made for you before you can even consider the alternatives. My father, the visionary founder of Wellington Global Investments, had planned my life with the same meticulous precision he applied to his multi-billion-dollar portfolio. "Remember, Ethan," he would say, straightening his custom brioni tie, "a Wellington doesn't simply succeed, we define what success means." Our estate in the Hamptons was the physical embodiment of that philosophy: 12 acres of manicured perfection, a 15,000 square foot main house, and a staff that anticipated your needs before you recognized them yourself. From the outside, it looked like paradise. From the inside, it felt like a beautiful prison. By 28, I had dutifully checked every box on my father's master plan: Wharton MBA, summa cum laude, vice president at Wellington Global, and engaged to Sophia Lancaster Pierce, daughter of my father's oldest friend and business ally. The merger of our families was as strategically sound as any business acquisition in my father's illustrious career. There was just one significant complication: I had fallen desperately, inconveniently in love with someone else. I met Olivia Morales during a charity gala at the Plaza. While navigating the usual crowd of socialites and business associates, I quite literally bumped into her as she balanced a tray of hors d'oeuvres. "I'm so sorry," she said, horrified as a mini crab cake tumbled to the floor. "Entirely my fault," I insisted, helping her steady the tray. Our eyes met, and something shifted in my carefully ordered world. Her warm brown eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, a genuine expression rarely seen in my social circles. Later that evening, I found her in the hotel kitchen, expertly directing a team of sous chefs through the chaos of feeding 500 Manhattan elites. "I'm sorry again about earlier," I said, feeling strangely nervous. "I'm Ethan, by the way." "Olivia," she replied, barely looking up from the delicate chocolate structures she was assembling. "And unless you're here to help plate these desserts, Mr. Wellington, I'll have to ask you to leave my kitchen." She knew who I was. Of course she did, but unlike everyone else in my life, she didn't seem particularly impressed by the fact. "Hand me that piping bag," she commanded, and somehow, I found myself following her instructions, spending the next hour helping her team plate desserts while wearing a $5,000 suit. It was the most exhilarating evening I'd had in years. I learned that Olivia was the hotel's executive pastry chef, having worked her way up from dishwasher over 10 years. She'd never attended culinary school but had apprenticed under renowned chefs in kitchens across the city, developing her signature style through relentless practice and innovation. "Cooking isn't about following recipes," she told me as we shared a staff meal after the event. It's about understanding ingredients so completely that you know instinctively what they need to become their best selves. Her philosophy resonated with something long dormant inside me. I began finding excuses to attend events at the plaza, always making my way to the kitchen afterward. Gradually, our conversations extended beyond those stolen moments. Coffee after her shifts turned into walks through Central Park, which evolved into dinners at hidden neighborhood restaurants where no one recognized the Wellington air. Olivia showed me a New York I'd never known existed despite living there my entire life: vibrant cultural festivals in Queens, family-owned bistros in Brooklyn, bustling markets in Chinatown where vendors greeted her by name and always insisted on giving her something extra. For 8 months, I lived a double life, corporate scion by day, myself by night. With Sophia, I attended opera galas and charity auctions, making appropriate appearances in the society pages. With Olivia, I learned to make tamales using her grandmother's recipe and debated the merits of different chocolate origins while walking along the Hudson at sunset. I knew it couldn't continue indefinitely. The reckoning came during the annual Wellington Foundation benefit, where, ironically, the plaza was catering. Sophia was discussing wedding venues with my mother while my father entertained potential investors. I excused myself, ostensibly to make a phone call, but in reality to seek out Olivia. I found her in a service corridor, directing her team with her usual quiet authority. When she saw me, her professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing the warmth I'd come to crave. "You shouldn't be back here," she whispered as I pulled her into an alcove. "I can't do this anymore, Liv," I said, the words tumbling out before I could reconsider. "The engagement, the company, all of it, none of it is what I want, Ethan," she sighed, her eyes sad. "You have responsibilities, a family legacy." "I love you," I interrupted. "That's the only thing that feels real in my life right now." Before she could respond, the service door swung open. My father stood there, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene before him. "Your mother is looking for you," he said coldly. "Your fiancé is about to give her speech." The next morning, I was summoned to my father's office at Wellington Tower. The space was deliberately intimidating, 60 stories above Manhattan, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the empire he'd built. "I've overlooked many of your indiscretions over the years," he began, not bothering with pleasantries. "But this public display with the help is beyond acceptable." "She's not the help, father. She's an executive chef at one of the finest hotels in the city." "A cook," he sneered. "You would throw away your birthright, your responsibility to this family, for a cook?" "Her name is Olivia," I said, a calm determination replacing the anxiety I'd felt walking in. "And yes, I would." What followed was the argument I'd been rehearsing in my mind for months. My father threatened to disinherit me. I reminded him that the trust from my maternal grandfather was beyond his control. He mentioned the burden this would place on my mother. I pointed out that her happiness had never before factored into his business decisions. "You will end this dalliance immediately," he finally commanded. "The engagement announcement for you and Sophia has already been sent to the Times. It runs this Sunday." I stood, straightening my jacket in an unconscious mirroring of his own habit. "No, it doesn't. I'm going to call Sophia myself and apologize for putting her in this position, but the engagement is off. And as for my position at Wellington Global, consider this my 2 weeks' notice." The expression on his face as I walked out, a mixture of shock and fury, would have terrified me just months ago. Now, it simply confirmed I was finally making my own choices. Olivia was stunned when I appeared at her apartment that evening, explaining what had transpired. "Ethan, I can't let you give up everything for me," she protested. "Your family, your inheritance." I took her hands in mine. "I'm not giving up everything. I'm choosing something better. Besides," I added with a smile, "I have an MBA from Wharton and enough from my grandfather's trust to start something new. I'll be fine." "Start what?" she asked skeptically. That was the question, wasn't it? For the first time in my life, the path ahead wasn't meticulously planned. The possibility was both terrifying and exhilarating. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change. I moved out of my penthouse into a modest apartment in Brooklyn. Sophia, to her credit, was understanding, even relieved. "We would have made each other miserable," she admitted. "I was only saying yes to please my father too." My mother vacillated between tearful pleas to reconsider and tentative questions about Olivia. My father maintained a stony silence, having my belongings from the family estate delivered by courier rather than face me himself. Meanwhile, Olivia and I settled into a relationship without secrets or time constraints. I accompanied her to farmers' markets at dawn, learning to select the perfect ingredients. She listened patiently as I sorted through possible new career paths. never pushing but always supportive. The idea came to us over dinner with her family in their Corona, Queens apartment. Olivia's mother had prepared a feast, explaining the history and technique behind each traditional dish. Her father, a contractor who had built his business from nothing after immigrating from Mexico, asked pointed questions about my intentions toward his daughter. With all due respect, sir, I said, I love Olivia because she reminds me daily that true success isn't measured by wealth or status, but by creating something meaningful and sharing it with people you care about. Later that night, as we walked through her childhood neighborhood, Olivia squeezed my hand. You know, there's this storefront for rent on Bedford Avenue. I've been thinking about it for years, but never had the capital to make it happen. What kind of storefront? I asked. The perfect size for a small patisserie and cafe, not some fancy midtown destination, just a neighborhood place with amazing food that makes people's days better. 6 months later, Olivia's opened its doors in Williamsburg. We kept it simple, exceptional pastries, perfectly prepared coffee, and a rotating lunch menu that showcased Olivia's creativity and technical brilliance. I handled the business side, discovering that my financial acumen was far more satisfying when applied to something I genuinely cared about. The cafe thrived, developing a loyal following that extended beyond the neighborhood as food bloggers discovered Olivia's innovative approach to traditional pastries. When a prominent restaurant critic declared her conscious transcendent and our small business model refreshingly authentic, the lines began forming around the block. A year into our new venture, an unexpected visitor arrived just before closing time. My father stood awkwardly by the counter, looking out of place in his bespoke suit amid our casual decor. Mr. Wellington, Olivia greeted him professionally, though I could see the tension in her shoulders. What can I get for you? I'm told the chocolate croissants are exceptional, he said stiffly. I'm afraid we're sold out for today, she replied. Perhaps you'd like to try the Tres Leches cake? It's Ethan's favorite. A flash of something, regret, perhaps, crossed his face at the reminder of how little he knew about me now. Father, I said, emerging from the back office, this is a surprise. He straightened, adopting the posture he used for difficult business negotiations. Your mother insisted I come. She's concerned about you. As you can see, I'm doing well. He glanced around the cafe, taking in the simple but elegant space we'd created. Yes, I can see that. Your establishment seems quite popular. We're doing fine, I said, deliberately misinterpreting his comment. In fact, we're opening a second location in Park Slope next month. 2 locations in under 2 years, he noted, and I could see the businessman in him making calculations. Impressive growth. We're not looking to scale aggressively, I explained. Quality over quantity. Each location needs to maintain the standards Olivia has established. He nodded slightly, as if approving of the strategy despite himself. Your grandfather would have understood this, he said finally, gesturing around the cafe. He built his first company to last, not just to sell. I sometimes forget that lesson. Coming from my father, this was tantamount to an apology. I felt Olivia's hand slip into mine, a silent show of support. Would you like to stay for dinner? I offered. Olivia's parents are coming over. Her father's bringing his famous mall sauce. The look of alarm that crossed his face was almost comical. Perhaps another time. I should get back to your mother. As he turned to leave, he paused. Wellington Equity Partners is creating a fund for innovative food service concepts. Small businesses with growth potential but a commitment to quality. You might consider submitting your business plan. It was an olive branch, offered in the only way he knew how, through business. Not an apology, not full acceptance, but a beginning. I'll think about it, I said, and for the first time in our conversation, he actually looked at Olivia. The Times Review mentioned your sourdough technique. Most impressive. After he left, Olivia turned to me, eyebrows raised. Was that your father attempting to be nice? I laughed. In his own way, yes. Consider yourself honored. He doesn't compliment just anyone's sourdough technique. Life settled into a rhythm entirely different from what had been planned for me. Olivia and I married in a simple ceremony in her parents' backyard, with both our families in attendance. My father remained mostly silent throughout the event, but I caught him deep in conversation with Olivia's father over drinks, discussing the challenges of building something from nothing. 2 years and 3 cafe locations later, Olivia and I welcomed our daughter, Elena, named after her grandmother. My mother, to everyone's surprise, became a doting grandmother who regularly took the subway to Brooklyn to visit, eventually moving to a townhouse nearby. My father's transformation was more gradual. He began by bringing business associates to our cafes, proudly introducing Olivia as the creative genius behind the operation. Eventually, He started appearing on Sunday afternoons alone, quietly reading the paper in the corner while enjoying the pastries. One such Sunday, as I brought him his usual coffee and croissant, he looked up from his paper with an expression I rarely saw: contentment. "You know," he said, "I spent decades believing I knew exactly what success looked like. I was wrong." I glanced over at Olivia, expertly guiding a new hire through the intricacies of our espresso machine, then at Elena toddling between tables, charming our regular customers. "I didn't reject everything you taught me," I told him, "just the parts that didn't fit who I really am." He nodded, a small smile softening his usually stern features. "Your grandfather used to say, a truly successful man builds a life, not just a fortune. I think he would approve of what you've built here." As if on cue, Olivia appeared with a plate of her latest creation, a delicate pastry incorporating flavors from both our family traditions. "New recipe," she explained. "I'm thinking of adding it to the permanent menu, but I need honest opinions first." My father took a careful bite, considering the flavors with the same concentration he once reserved for investment prospectuses. "Remarkable," he pronounced. "Absolutely remarkable." What he was referring to, the pastry, our business, or the life we had created against all odds, wasn't entirely clear, but watching Olivia beam at the compliment while our daughter climbed onto her grandfather's lap, I realized it didn't matter. Some people spend their entire lives chasing a narrowly defined idea of success, never realizing that the most valuable things can't be listed on a balance sheet or displayed in a mansion. Real wealth lies in the freedom to choose your own path and the courage to follow it, even when it leads somewhere unexpected. For me, that path led away from the empirical certainty of Wellington Global investments to the beautiful chaos of flour-dusted countertops and early morning market runs. It led from obligation to passion, from inheritance to creation. And every day, as I open our cafe doors alongside the woman who helped me redefine everything I thought I knew about success, I am certain of one thing: I am richer now than I ever would have been as the heir to the Wellington fortune.
I'm a 31-year-old woman married to Alex for 4 years. We have a beautiful 14-month-old son, Ethan, who is the light of our lives. 6 weeks ago, my husband's older sister, Vanessa, asked if she could stay with us for a couple of weeks while her apartment was being renovated. Despite my reservations, I agreed because family is important to my husband. From the moment she arrived, I knew this was a mistake. Vanessa has very strong opinions about parenting and doesn't hesitate to share them, loudly and frequently, despite never having children herself. The first incident occurred during dinner on her second night with us. Ethan was fussing a bit while I was trying to feed him some mashed vegetables. Without warning, Vanessa reached over, took the spoon from my hand, and said, "You're doing it all wrong. He's clearly not hungry. You shouldn't force him." I was stunned into silence. Alex gently intervened, saying, "Vanessa, we appreciate your concern, but we know how it works for our son." She rolled her eyes and muttered, "Well, clearly you don't, but whatever." Things only escalated from there. Vanessa began criticizing everything about our parenting, our sleep training methods. "You're traumatizing him." Our decision to introduce solid foods too early, and even how I held him. "You're not supporting his head properly. He's not a sack of potatoes." One morning, she walked into the kitchen while I was preparing Ethan's breakfast and announced that she'd rearranged his nursery overnight because the feng shui was all wrong, and it was affecting his energy. I discovered she had moved furniture, reorganized his clothes, and even relocated some of his toys to the donation pile because they were overstimulating. I kept my composure and informed Alex, who spoke with her again. Vanessa apologized, but her behavior didn't change. Instead, she became more passive-aggressive, making comments like, "I guess some mothers just don't care about creating optimal environments for brain development, and it's so brave of you to ignore all the research on infant nutrition." The worst incident happened last week. Ethan was having a particularly difficult day. Teething pain had made him cranky, and he'd been crying on and off all morning. I was exhausted but managing. Vanessa had gone out shopping, providing a brief respite from her constant commentary. When she returned and heard Ethan crying, she stormed into the nursery where I was rocking him and snatched him from my arms, saying, "Oh my God, he's been crying for hours. Can't you do anything right? This is why some people shouldn't have children." Something inside me snapped. I took my son back from her and said through gritted teeth, "Get out of my son's room." Now, she looked shocked but backed away. As soon as I had calmed Ethan down and put him down for his nap, I confronted Vanessa in the living room. "I've had enough," I told her. "You've been here for almost 6 weeks, well beyond the couple of weeks you promised. You've criticized every aspect of our parenting, rearranged our home without permission, and today you crossed an unforgivable line. I want you out of our house by tomorrow." Vanessa's eyes widened. "You can't kick me out. My apartment isn't ready, and I have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem," I replied. "You should have thought about that before disrespecting me in my own home and undermining my parenting at every turn. Stay with friends, get a hotel, whatever you need to do, but you're not staying here." Vanessa immediately called Alex at work, crying about how I was throwing her out onto the street. She also called my in-laws, who then called me to express their disappointment in my lack of compassion and family loyalty. Alex came home early that day, and to his credit, after hearing both sides, he supported my decision. "Vanessa," he said, "we love you, but your behavior has been unacceptable. We can help you find somewhere else to stay, but you need to leave tomorrow." Vanessa left the next morning, slamming the door behind her. Now my in-laws are angry with us, saying we should have been more understanding of her situation. Alex's uncles and aunts have been texting us about family duty and how blood is thicker than water. I understand that Vanessa is in a difficult position with her apartment renovations taking longer than expected, but I don't think that gives her the right to criticize our parenting, rearrange our home, and ultimately try to take our child from my arms. Am I wrong for prioritizing my mental health and my son's well-being over extended family obligations? Should I have endured a few more weeks of her behavior to keep the peace? I moved into my suburban neighborhood 3 years ago, attracted by the quiet streets and family-friendly atmosphere. For the most part, it's been everything I hoped for until last month when a simple misunderstanding with my next-door neighbor escalated into full-blown community drama. It started with a tree. A large maple sits on the property line between my house and my neighbor Karen's. Last autumn, I noticed some dead branches hanging precariously over my driveway and my children's play area. After consulting an arborist who confirmed these branches posed a safety risk, I scheduled a tree service to trim them. The morning of the appointment, I left a note in Karen's mailbox explaining the situation and the limited trimming that would occur that afternoon. I had to leave for work early and wouldn't see her before the tree service arrived. In retrospect, I should have discussed this with her in person days earlier. But between work deadlines and my children's activities, it slipped my mind until the last minute. When I returned home that evening, Karen was waiting for me at the property line, visibly upset. Apparently, the tree service had been more aggressive with their trimming than I had authorized, removing several healthy branches along with the dead ones. Karen accused me of deliberately damaging her tree without permission. I apologized sincerely for the miscommunication with the tree service and offered to split the cost of having an arborist evaluate the tree to ensure its health wasn't compromised. She refused, claiming I was trying to buy my way out of responsibility and that the tree was irreparably damaged. The next day, I discovered Karen had posted about the incident in our neighborhood Facebook group, characterizing me as a dishonest person who had mutilated her beloved tree while she was at work. The post included unflattering photos of the trimmed tree from specific angles that made the pruning look more severe than it was. Neighbors I had barely spoken to began commenting, taking sides without knowing the full story. Some suggested I should pay to replace the entire tree, valued at thousands of dollars, while others defended me, pointing out that trimming branches overhanging one's property is legally permitted in our state. Things took an even more bizarre turn when Karen installed security cameras pointed directly at my property, claiming she needed to protect her remaining trees from further destruction. She also began documenting every time my children or I ventured near the property line, taking photos and noting the time and date in a notebook she carried conspicuously whenever she was outside. Attempts to resolve the situation directly with Karen were unsuccessful. She refused my invitation to sit down with a neutral third party from the neighborhood association. Instead, she escalated by contacting the city's code enforcement office, claiming I had violated several ordinances with the tree trimming. I hadn't, as confirmed by an inspector who visited. Last weekend, I hosted my daughter's 10th birthday party in our backyard. Karen chose this moment to operate her leaf blower continuously for 3 hours, despite there being few leaves to blow in mid-spring. When other neighbors asked her to stop because of the noise disrupting the children's party, she claimed she had every right to maintain her yard whenever she wanted. The situation has divided our once peaceful neighborhood. Some neighbors have stopped speaking to me, while others have shared their own Karen stories, revealing I'm not the first to experience her territorial behavior. The neighborhood association president suggested a community mediation session, but Karen declined to participate. My children now feel uncomfortable playing in our backyard, fearing they're being watched and recorded. My previously friendly relationships with several neighbors have cooled, as some believe I initiated the conflict by not seeking explicit permission before trimming the tree. I've considered reaching out to Karen one more time with a peace offering, perhaps offering to plant a new tree on her property as a goodwill gesture, even though the arborist confirmed the original tree is perfectly healthy despite the trimming. However, I'm concerned this might be interpreted as an admission of wrongdoing and reinforce her behavior. Should I continue trying to make amends with Karen for the sake of neighborhood harmony, or is it time to accept that some conflicts simply can't be resolved through goodwill alone? Has anyone navigated a similar situation successfully? My cousin Emily and I have always been close, more like sisters than cousins. When she got engaged last year, I was thrilled to be asked to be her maid of honor. I threw myself into planning her bridal shower, organizing her bachelorette weekend, and supporting her through all the wedding preparations. Everything was going smoothly until 3 weeks before the wedding when Emily and her fiancé Jake sent out an unusual email to all wedding guests. In it, they explained that instead of traditional wedding gifts, they were requesting cash contributions toward their honeymoon to Bali. The email included a link to a honeymoon registry website where guests could purchase specific experiences like couples massages, sunset dinners, and excursions. While this practice has become increasingly common, what caused controversy was the minimum contribution amount, $250 per guest. The email explicitly stated, "We've been living together for 2 years and have everything we need for our home. Your presence at our wedding is a gift, but if you'd like to contribute to our once-in-a-lifetime honeymoon, we kindly request a minimum gift of $250 per person to help make our dreams come true." My aunt, Emily's mother, called me immediately after receiving the email, upset about how this would be perceived by family members, particularly older relatives and those with financial constraints. She asked me, as maid of honor and Emily's closest confidant, to speak with her about reconsidering this approach. I carefully brought up the subject with Emily over coffee, suggesting that while the honeymoon fund was a great idea, perhaps they could remove the minimum amount requirement and allow guests to contribute what they felt comfortable giving. I also mentioned that some family members might prefer to give traditional gifts and that flexibility would be appreciated. Emily's reaction stunned me. She accused me of trying to ruin her special day and said if I was a true friend, I would defend her decisions instead of criticizing them. She claimed that $250 was practically nothing considering the cost of their wedding, and that anyone who couldn't afford it probably shouldn't be attending anyway. I tried to explain that for many people, including our grandparents on fixed incomes, our cousins who were students, and friends who were just starting their careers, $250 plus travel expenses to attend the wedding represented a significant financial burden. Emily dismissed these concerns, saying she and Jake deserved their dream honeymoon after investing so much in providing a beautiful wedding experience for their guests. The conversation ended with Emily storming out of the cafe. That evening, she removed me as her maid of honor via text message and asked her college roommate to take my place. What followed was an explosive family divide. Some relatives sided with Emily, arguing that it was her wedding and she could establish any gift expectations she wanted. Others were appalled by what they saw as entitlement and poor etiquette. The family text thread became a battleground of passive-aggressive comments and outright arguments. My aunt blamed me for creating the rift by questioning Emily's decisions. My parents defended me, saying I had approached the situation tactfully and with Emily's best interests at heart. Extended family members began taking sides, with some canceling their RSVPs to the wedding in protest. Emily and Jake ultimately proceeded with their wedding and honeymoon plans unchanged. I attended the wedding as a guest, not as part of the bridal party, and contributed the requested $250 despite my objections to the requirement, feeling it was important to support my cousin despite our disagreement. At the reception, Emily barely acknowledged me, and several relatives who had sided with her gave me the cold shoulder. What should have been a joyous family celebration became an uncomfortable event marked by tension and forced smiles for photographs. 2 months have passed since the wedding, and the family remains divided. Holiday plans are already being complicated by relatives refusing to attend if certain others will be present. My aunt has suggested that I should apologize to Emily for interfering with her wedding plans, while my parents maintain I did nothing wrong by expressing concerns privately to my cousin. Emily and Jake returned from their honeymoon last week. She posted dozens of photos on social media thanking everyone who generously contributed to their unforgettable experience, specifically naming contributors, a move many interpreted as deliberately highlighting who had and hadn't met their contribution expectations. I value my relationship with Emily and want to repair it, but I'm not sure I should apologize for raising valid concerns about an approach that ultimately created significant family tension. Was I wrong to suggest she reconsider the minimum gift requirement? Should I have supported her decision regardless of its impact on other family members? How do I navigate repairing these relationships without validating behavior I still believe was inconsiderate? I've been working at a mid-sized marketing firm for 3 years. Until recently, our office culture was collaborative and friendly, with a tradition of celebrating employee birthdays with a small gathering in the break room, complete with cake and a card signed by everyone. Last month, this seemingly innocent tradition sparked a workplace conflict that has created lingering tension among colleagues. It began when our manager, Lisa, announced we would be celebrating 3 birthdays occurring in the same week: mine, my colleague Jonathan's, and our newest team member, Rachel's. Lisa assigned Megan, our administrative assistant, to coordinate the celebration as usual. The day before the celebration, I overheard Megan telling another colleague that she had ordered an elaborate custom cake for Rachel depicting her favorite hobby, rock climbing, but had simply purchased standard supermarket cakes for Jonathan and me. When I asked Megan about this discrepancy, she explained that Rachel was new and deserved a special welcome birthday, while Jonathan and I had been celebrated before. I expressed concern that this unequal treatment might make Jonathan and me feel less valued, suggesting instead that all 3 birthdays be celebrated equally, perhaps with one larger, higher quality cake for everyone. Megan became defensive, stating that she had already placed the orders and that I was being petty about cake. She also mentioned that Rachel had dietary restrictions. She's gluten sensitive but not celiac, which justified the special cake, though she hadn't bothered to check if Jonathan or I had any dietary considerations. I don't, but Jonathan is lactose intolerant. The next day, the celebration proceeded as Megan had planned. Rachel received her elaborate custom cake, presented first with significant fanfare, while Jonathan and I were presented with basic supermarket sheet cakes afterward, almost as an afterthought. Rachel's cake was accompanied by premium plates and utensils, while ours came with standard office supplies. The difference was obvious to everyone. Some colleagues looked uncomfortable, while others seemed oblivious to the awkwardness. Jonathan, always conflict avoidant, thanked everyone politely but later told me privately that he felt embarrassed and overlooked. After the celebration, I spoke with Lisa, expressing concern not about the cakes themselves, but about the message sent by such visibly unequal treatment of employees celebrating the same milestone. I emphasized that consistent treatment fosters a sense of fairness and belonging in the workplace. Lisa seemed surprised by my feedback, admitting she hadn't noticed the disparity because she arrived late to the gathering. She'd promised to speak with Megan and ensure future celebrations would be more equitable. The next day, I received an email from Rachel, who had apparently been told about my concerns. She accused me of trying to ruin her first office birthday and being jealous of her warm welcome. She copied several colleagues on the email, including Lisa and Megan. This sparked a flurry of reply-all responses, with the office quickly dividing into factions. Some colleagues supported my perspective about workplace equality, while others accused me of being petty and making a mountain out of a molehill. Megan claimed I was undermining her role and that I should have spoken to her directly instead of going to Lisa, though I had, in fact, approached Megan first. Lisa eventually called a team meeting to address the situation, emphasizing the importance of direct communication and equal treatment in the workplace. She announced a new policy for birthday celebrations. All would be treated uniformly with the same type of cake and presentation. While this resolved the procedural issue, the emotional aftermath lingers. Rachel barely speaks to me now, and Megan is noticeably cold. Several colleagues have told me privately that they think I overreacted, while others have thanked me for addressing a pattern of favoritism they had noticed in other contexts as well. The office atmosphere, once collegial and supportive, now feels strained. Small groups whisper together, conversations stop when certain people enter the room, and team projects have become awkward when they involve members from different sides of the conflict. I stand by my belief that equality in workplace celebrations is important, but I wonder if I could have handled the situation differently to achieve the same outcome without creating such division. Was I wrong to address this issue, or should I have ignored the unequal treatment to maintain workplace harmony? How can I repair relationships with colleagues who viewed my concerns as an attack on the new employee's welcome?